Hey Lizzie, I have your most recent quiz attempt here. Sorry for the delay in getting back to you. Um, so let's pull up the questions that you missed. So this says, which statement is true about the end behavior of the graphed function? So the end behavior is what is it doing on the ends? So we're either talking about positive infinity in the x direction this way. We could be talking about negative infinity in the x direction that way. It just means as that graph goes on forever in either one of those directions. I suppose you could talk about what it does in the y, positive and negative also, but mostly it'll be referencing x. So end behavior, again, is what's happening at the ends. When x goes to 0, we're talking about this spot right here. So this isn't the end, one of the ends of the graph. The first one says, as the x values go to positive infinity, the function's values also go to positive infinity. Yeah, and that's because this graph is going to continue upwards in that direction. As the x values go to negative infinity, so that means as you look at the graph towards the left, the function's values are equal to 0. That's not true. They also go to positive infinity. As the x values go to negative infinity, the function's values go to negative infinity. No, that means the graph would have to curve downward, and it doesn't. It curves upward. So that first one is correct. For which interval for the graphed function contains the local maximum? So a local maximum is not going to be at the ends. So because this graph continues upwards, there really is no maximum on those ends because it goes on forever in those directions. A local max is where is there like a peak, a high point in the graph. And so a high point in the graph occurs right here. And so that is between 1 and 2 on the graph. So we're always talking about the x values. So we're talking between x equals 1 and x equals 2. That's where we have this local maximum. Between -1 and 0, which is what you selected, that's this point down here. That's a local minimum because it's at a low point. So maximums look like this, and minimums will look like that. So a local max, again, is this high point, and a local min would be a low point. Which statement is true? So we're talking about, it looks like when x is less than 0 for the first two options and when x is greater than 0. So we're either talking about this left side of the graph over here or this right side of the graph over here. So we're just going to read each one and see if it's true or false. So when the function is when x is less than 0, the function is less than 0 over the interval. No, that first one's not true. So that first one says that when x is between negative infinity and -4, so that's this area. It's saying that the function is less than 0. That's not true. It's up here. So above the x-axis is going to be greater than 0, and below the x-axis is going to be less than 0. Because all of those y values down there are negative, and in the top one, all the y values up here are positive. So that's not true. Over the interval 0 to -3, that would be all the way to here. So for this portion of the graph, that is less than 0, but it's saying from negative infinity all the way to -3. But again, that first one was wrong because that part from negative infinity to -4, it's actually greater than 0. The third one says over the interval negative infinity to -3, the function's greater than 0. No, that's not true either because, again, we just shared this part's actually less than 0. This is less than 0, and this part's greater than 0. So the second and third ones are not correct. The last one says over the interval -0 or negative infinity to 4, the function is greater than 0. And that is true. Let me get all that writing back off of there. So from negative infinity, so basically coming way out from the left all the way to -4. And we really can't see what the graph's doing here. I mean, it's going like this, up, 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 up. It will keep going forever. And that is all greater than 0. So at -4 is actually when it goes below the x-axis, so it becomes negative. But from the left, as you're reading that graph all the way up to -4, those y values are greater than 0. So again, if it says f of x is greater than 0, we're talking about the graph should be above the x-axis. And when it says the function is less than 0, the graph will be below the x-axis. Okay, let's take a look at the last one that you missed. Which lists all of the x-intercepts of the graphed function? So x-intercepts are where the graph crosses the x-axis. And so as I look at this, there are 3 of them. 1, 2, and 3. So you got 1, 0, and 2, 0, but you missed this one back here, which was -3, 0. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful, kind of going through that, the questions that you missed. So, yeah, go ahead and let me know when you watch the video. I did add a retake. Let me know how you do and see if you need any additional help.